Sylvester Stallone stepped onto the stage of the Kelly Clarkson Show to thunderous applause, the audience rising to their feet as the familiar Rocky theme played over the speakers. Dressed in a dark tailored jacket, black jeans, and his signature aviator shades, he walked with the kind of easy swagger that only comes from decades as a Hollywood icon. Kelly met him halfway for a quick hug, her smile wide as she gestured for him to take his seat on the plush couch across from hers. The opening minutes were lighthearted, full of nostalgia and laughter. Stallone shared a funny behind-the-scenes story from Rocky III, teased Kelly about her impressive singing voice, and even playfully flexed his bicep when she mentioned his workout routine. The crowd ate it up, clapping and laughing along. But as Kelly shuffled through her cards and leaned in for the next segment, her smile carried a glint of curiosity that hinted they were about to tread into deeper waters. "So Sly," she began, "you've had such an incredible career. Decades of hits, awards, franchises, but lately, you've also been making headlines for other reasons." The audience let out a low murmur, sensing the shift. Stallone chuckled, adjusting his sunglasses on the bridge of his nose. "There's always other reasons," he said, his tone casual. As Kelly nodded but pressed forward. "Well, one of those reasons is that interview you did last month, you know? It's the one where you had some strong words about the new direction of the Rocky franchise without you." The crowd reacted with a mix of ohs and laughter. Stallone's smile tightened just a touch, his posture straightening. "Yeah, I spoke my mind," he replied, "and I stand by it." Kelly tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just slightly in curiosity. Some people thought it came off a little intense. The faintest hint of tension flickered in Stallone's expression, but his voice stayed even. "I'm a passionate guy," he said. "That's never been a secret." The audience clapped, but the applause carried an undercurrent of anticipation, as if they could already sense there was more too. "Come." Kelly leaned back in her chair, her smile still warm but with that subtle edge that experienced hosts use when they're about to dig a little deeper. She shuffled the cue cards in her hand, glancing briefly at the audience before locking her gaze on Stallone again. "I get passion," she said lightly, "but in that interview, you didn't just critique the direction of the Rocky franchise. You called out specific people by name. Some folks felt like that was crossing a line." The crowd reacted with a chorus of murmurs and a few scattered claps, the energy in the room beginning to shift. Stallone smirked faintly, leaning back on the couch with one arm stretched along the backrest. "If I think something's wrong, I'm gonna say it. I'm not in the business of sugarcoating," he replied. Kelly nodded slowly, her tone still measured. "Sure, but don't you think that kind of bluntness might burn bridges?" Stallone's jaw flexed ever so slightly, though he kept his voice even. "I've built enough bridges in my career that I can afford to lose a few." The audience let out an appreciative "oh," and some clapped in support, but others stayed silent. Sensing the shift toward something more personal, Kelly tilted her head, clearly weighing her next words. "I mean, some of the people you named, they were collaborators, friends even. Has anyone reached out to you about what you said?" Stallone gave a short laugh, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, and I told them the same thing I'm telling you. It's not personal, it's about the work." Kelly's brows lifted, but it felt personal to them. The air in the room thickened, and for the first time, Stallone's smile faded entirely. He looked straight at her, his voice a notch lower. "Maybe that says more about them than it does about me." The audience reacted again, the tension palpable now, and even the camera operators leaned in slightly. Sensing the conversation was edging toward territory daytime television doesn't often tread. Asterisk. The polite daytime gloss was thinning fast, and the audience could feel it. Kelly set her cue cards down on the small table between them, subtle but deliberate signal that she was stepping away from the scripted questions. Her posture straightened, her hands clasping together in her lap as she leaned just slightly toward Stallone. "I think a lot of people were surprised," she began, her voice steady. "Because you've always been known as a guy who lifts people up, your co-stars, your crews, your friends. But in that interview, some felt like you were tearing people down." The crowd reacted with soft murmurs, a few nodding, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Stallone tilted his head, his eyes narrowing just slightly behind the tint of his sunglasses. "I wasn't tearing anyone down," he said, his voice slower now, each word weighted. "I was telling the truth. If people can't handle that, that's on them." Kelly gave a small, almost skeptical smile. "But there's truth, and then there's delivery." Stallone leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his voice dropping just enough to make the audience lean in. "In this business, for nearly 50 years, I fought for every role, every script, every dollar to make movies happen. I'm not going to start pretending now that everyone plays fair because they don't." The audience responded with a ripple of applause, but the atmosphere was tense, not celebratory. "But do you think maybe, just maybe, there's a better way to handle it than putting people on blast in the press?" Stallone's lips pressed into a thin line, his head tilting ever so slightly. "Dan, what way would that be? Smile and nod while they take something that's mine? Not my style." That line landed heavy, and the audience let out a low, drawn-out, "oh." Offstage, a stage manager made eye contact with a producer in the wings, both recognizing that the conversation was teetering dangerously close to a full-blown clash. Kelly, however, didn't pull back. She adjusted her seat, locked eyes with Stallone, and asked, "So you're saying you don't regret a word of it?" The pause before his answer was long enough to feel electric. "Not one," he said finally, and the crowd erupted half in applause, half in startled murmurs, fully aware they were watching the temperature rise in real time. Kelly shifted. In her chair, her expression tightening just enough for the cameras to catch it, her voice carrying a firmer edge now. "But Sly," she said, "you've built a career on the idea of loyalty, sticking with your people, and yet the way you've been talking lately, it almost sounds like you've turned your back on some of them." The audience reacted. Instantly, with a sharp mix of gasps and murmurs, the sudden escalation catching even the band by surprise. Stallone's head lifted slightly, his jaw tightening, the glint behind his sunglasses sharpening into something more direct. "Turned my back," he repeated, his tone low but dangerous. "Let me tell you something, loyalty goes both ways. When people cash in on something you created without respect, without even a conversation, that's not loyalty. That's betrayal." The crowd let out an audible "oh," and some clapped, though others sat frozen, sensing the intensity. Building, Kelly didn't flinch, her voice cutting through the noise. "But do you really think calling them out on national television fixes that? Or does it just make it worse?" Stallone leaned forward now, elbows on his knees, his voice rising just enough to fill every corner of the studio. "I'm not here to fix their feelings, Kelly. I'm here to stand up for myself." The audience erupted into a mixture of applause and nervous laughter. The energy split right down the middle. Kelly, sensing the moment teetering, pushed once more. "Or maybe," she said carefully but pointedly, "it's about making sure the headlines stay about you." The reaction from the audience was instant and electric, loud gasps. A few scattered cheers and the unmistakable rustle of people pulling out their phones. Stallone straightened in his seat, taking off his sunglasses slowly and setting them on the table between them. His eyes locked on hers, unblinking. "You really want to go there?" he asked, his voice dropping into that deep, unmistakable Stallone growl. Kelly didn't answer right away, and the silence between them stretched long enough for the tension to feel almost unbearable. Somewhere off stage, a producer was already motioning for a break, but neither of them looked away. The room knew it. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a standoff. Asterisk. The air in the studio was thick now, the kind of heavy silence that makes even the live band hesitate to play a note. Stallone's eyes stayed locked on Kelly, his jaw set in a way that left no doubt he was holding back more than he was saying. "You know what?" he finally said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed. Came here to talk about my work, my projects, my future. Not to be told I'm chasing headlines." The audience let out a collective, "Oh." The reaction split between shock and excitement. Kelly leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Sly, I'm just asking the questions people are talking about." "Yeah," Stallone cut in sharply. "And sometimes people talk a lot of nonsense." That drew a mix of cheers and nervous laughter. the tension pulsing like static in the air. Kelly smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. "I'm just doing my job," she said. Stallone nodded slowly. "I'm doing mine," which means knowing when a conversation's over. With that, he reached up, straightened the lapels of his jacket, and began to rise from the couch. The audience gasped, phones shooting up instantly to record. Kelly tried to interject, her hand lifting in a small gesture to get him to stay. "Wait, hold on, we can," but Stallone was already standing, adjusting his sunglasses back over. His eyes. "No, I think we're done here," he said, his voice calm but carrying enough weight to hush the audience. The cameras followed as he turned toward the wings, each step slow and deliberate. A stagehand moved to open the curtain. The audience's reactions swirled together into a chaotic blend of cheers, murmurs, and shouts of, "Don't go." He paused just before exiting, looking back toward Kelly one last time. "You wanted a headline, Kelly?" he said. "Congratulations, you got it." And with that, he disappeared behind the curtain, leaving the couch empty and the room buzzing with a cocktail of adrenaline and disbelief. For a long moment after Stallone vanished behind the curtain, the stage felt oddly unbalanced. The bright couch sitting empty, the applause sign blinking without conviction, and the band playing a faint, hesitant riff that seemed unsure whether to keep the energy up or fade out entirely. Kelly stayed seated, her hands folded loosely in her lap, her gaze lingering for a second on the spot where Stallone had stood just moments earlier. Then she looked toward the audience with a measured smile, the kind that said she was both processing and performing at the same time. "Well," she said, letting out a small, breathy laugh that wasn't in the script. The crowd responded with scattered laughter and a few whoops, but the tension was still thick enough to taste. Kelly glanced toward the side stage, likely catching the eyes of her producers, then back to the audience. "Live TV, folks. You never know what's going to happen," she added. "Ray," she sprayed sir, her voice light, but her eyes betraying just a flicker of irritation. A few people in the audience clapped. Others leaned toward their neighbors to whisper excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. In the control room, a director's voice crackled over the comms, instructing camera operators to hold a wide shot of the set. A producer scrambled to decide whether to fill the rest of the segment with a commercial break or pivot to the next guest. Kelly, sensing the clock ticking, pushed forward with her trademark professionalism. "We're going to take a quick break," she said with a smile, "and when we come back, I promise there will be no boxing matches on this couch. At least I hope not." The joke landed with mild laughter, enough to lighten the mood, if only slightly. As the cameras cut to commercial, audience members pulled out their phones, already scrolling and posting the clip of Stallone's walk-off, destined to go viral before the show even finished taping. Backstage, Stallone was reportedly already on his way out of the building, but on set, Kelly straightened her posture, ready to carry on, whatever the rest of the episode held. Everyone in the room knew one thing. The moment had already been sealed as one of the show's most unforgettable. Live clashes. Asterisk.